Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Spencer Mosley had built his empire from nothing, transforming a single shipping container into the largest private logistics network spanning from Seattle to Dubai. At 42, his weathered hands still bore the scars from loading cargo in freezing warehouses during his early 20s. But now those same hands signed contracts worth millions. His steel-gray eyes, sharp as razors, had witnessed betrayals that would break lesser men. Yet Spencer had learned early that forgiveness was a luxury he couldn't afford. The Dubai operation was his crown jewel, a massive distribution hub that controlled trade routes across the Middle East. Spencer had spent 3 months personally overseeing the expansion, sleeping 4 hours a night, negotiating with sheiks and warlords alike. His reputation preceded him. Spencer Mosley got things done, no matter the cost, no matter who stood in his way. But success had come with a price. His marriage to Laura Brady had crumbled 2 years ago when he discovered her affair with Gerard Little, a smooth-talking real estate developer who specialized in luxury condos. Spencer had built Laura a life of comfort, a sprawling mansion in the hills, designer everything, access to his exclusive circles. Yet she chose to throw it away for Gerard's empty promises and cocaine-fueled parties. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Spencer's team of lawyers, led by the ruthless Zachary Mullins, had ensured Laura received the bare minimum. She got the house, a modest monthly allowance, and joint custody of their 8-year-old son, Jeffrey. What she didn't know was that Spencer had been documenting her drug use, her neglect of Jeffrey, and Gerard's criminal associates for months before filing. Spencer never forgave betrayal. Ever. Laura had learned this the hard way when she tried to seek alimony beyond what the court ordered. Her car had mysteriously developed brake problems. Her credit cards were inexplicably canceled. Her favorite restaurants suddenly had no available tables. Spencer's reach was long, and his memory longer. Now, standing in his Dubai penthouse overlooking the glittering cityscape, Spencer reviewed the quarterly reports from his Seattle operations. Jeffrey was supposed to call at 8 p.m. Dubai time, their weekly FaceTime tradition that Spencer never missed, no matter where business took him. The boy was the only person Spencer had ever loved unconditionally, the only remnant of his marriage worth preserving. As Spencer poured himself a glass of single malt whiskey, his encrypted phone buzzed. Jeffrey's face appeared on screen, but something was terribly wrong. The boy's lips were blue, swollen and split, his usually bright eyes dulled with terror and exhaustion. "Daddy," Jeffrey's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "He locked me in the freezer for 3 hours. Said he'll put you in the wood chipper if you come." Spencer's whiskey glass shattered against the marble floor. His face remained expressionless, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the phone. In the background, he could hear Laura's shrill voice. "Kids exaggerate. He left the fridge open." Then Gerard's face filled the screen, his features twisted with malicious satisfaction. "Heard you're in Dubai? Your kid's funeral's Monday." The line went dead. Spencer stood motionless for 30 seconds, his mind processing the threat with the cold calculation that had made him millions. Then he moved with deadly purpose. His first call was to Richard Green, his head of security and former Navy SEAL, who handled Spencer's most delicate problems. The second was to his pilot. "Fuel the jet. We leave in 20 minutes, Spencer commanded, already pulling on his jacket. "And Richard, bring the special equipment." By the time Spencer's Gulfstream G650 lifted off from Dubai International Airport, he had already made 17 calls. His network of contacts, some legitimate, others decidedly not, were mobilizing across 3 time zones. Gerard Little had made the fatal mistake of threatening Spencer's son. Laura had made an equally fatal mistake by allowing it to happen. Spencer Mosley was coming home, and he was bringing hell with him. Chapter 2. The Network. As the jet sliced through the night sky over the Arabian Peninsula, Spencer transformed his mobile office into a war room. Satellite internet connected him to surveillance feeds from Laura's house, which his security team had been monitoring since the divorce. What he saw made his blood run cold. Jeffrey was locked in the basement, shivering in the corner while Gerard paced above, screaming at Laura about the Dubai problem. The boy hadn't eaten in hours, and dried blood crusted his split lip. Laura cowered on the couch, high on whatever Gerard had given her, completely oblivious to her son's suffering. Spencer's network was vast and diverse. In Seattle, Don Dalton ran Spencer's legitimate shipping operations while maintaining connections to dock workers who move more than just legal cargo. In Portland, Clifford Durham managed Spencer's fleet of unmarked trucks that could disappear containers without paperwork. In Vancouver, Warren Hobbs coordinated with Spencer's most trusted contact, Lon Shoemaker, a man who specialized in making problems permanently disappear. Each of these men owed Spencer their lives, their livelihoods, or both. When Spencer called, they answered without question. "Don, I need everything on Gerard Little. Finances, associates, property, family. Everything." Spencer's voice was ice. "Clifford, prepare the special warehouse. Warren, contact Lon. Tell him it's a family matter." But Spencer's most valuable asset was Harold Wiley, a nondescript accountant who ran Spencer's information network. Harold could access any database, track any financial transaction, and expose any secret. Within hours of Spencer's call, Harold had compiled Gerard's complete life story. Gerard Little wasn't just a real estate developer. He was a predator who had built his fortune by targeting vulnerable divorced women, bleeding them dry, then discarding them. Laura was his fifth victim in 3 years. The others had ended up broken, bankrupt, or worse. Sheila Wood had committed suicide after Gerard destroyed her custody case. Lindsay Walter had overdosed on the drugs Gerard supplied. Graciela Nelson had simply vanished. But Gerard had made one crucial mistake. He kept trophies. Photos, videos, personal items from each victim, stored in a safety deposit box under a false name. Harold had found the bank, the box number, and the access codes Gerard used. Spencer's jet was still 6 hours from Seattle when his phone rang. It was Nick Curtis, Spencer's contact inside the Seattle Police Department. Nick owed Spencer his career and his life after Spencer had eliminated the gang members threatening Nick's family 5 years ago. "Spencer, there's been a development." Nick's voice was tense. "Laura called 911 an hour ago. Claimed someone was trying to break into her house. When units responded, Gerard told them it was a false alarm, said Laura was having a psychiatric episode. They left, but I pulled the recording. You need to hear this." The audio file Nick sent made Spencer's jaw clench. Laura's voice, slurred but desperate. "Please, he has my son locked up. He's going to hurt him. Please help us." Gerard's voice in the background, smooth and convincing. "She's been drinking again, officer. Having delusions. The boy's fine, just sleeping." Spencer's knuckles cracked as he closed his hands into fists. Gerard wasn't just threatening Jeffrey. He was systematically isolating him, ensuring no one would believe the boy's cries for help. It was a pattern Gerard had perfected with his previous victims. "Nick," Spencer's voice carried the weight of mountains, "I want a 24-hour delay on any emergency calls to that address. System glitch. Can you arrange it? Consider it done." As dawn broke over the Pacific, Spencer's jet began its descent into Seattle. In the cargo hold, Richard Green secured the last of their special equipment, items that wouldn't appear on any customs manifest. Spencer had spent the flight creating detailed plans for 3 different scenarios, each more brutal than the last. Gerard Little had declared war on Spencer Mosley. What Gerard didn't understand was that Spencer had been fighting wars since he was 16, and he had never lost. Not once. The wheels touched down on Spencer's private runway as rain began to fall across Seattle's skyline. Spencer looked out at the city that had made him, that had taught him the harsh lessons of survival and dominance. "Time to collect what's owed," he murmured, watching the rain streak down the window like tears. Chapter 3. The Reckoning Begins. Spencer's convoy consisted of 3 black SUVs with bulletproof glass and encrypted communications. He rode in the middle vehicle with Richard Green, while Lance Webb and Kyle Ramirez flanked them in the escort cars. Each man was armed and had served with Spencer in various capacities for over a decade. They weren't just employees, They were his pack, bound by blood and shared secrets. The first stop wasn't Laura's house. Spencer never moved without complete intelligence, and he needed to understand Gerard's full operation before striking. They drove to a warehouse in Georgetown that Spencer owned through a shell company, where Harold Wiley had established a temporary command center. Harold had been busy during Spencer's flight. The warehouse now housed a sophisticated surveillance operation with multiple screens showing feeds from cameras Harold had hacked throughout the city. Laura's house, Gerard's office, his apartment, his favorite restaurants. Every location Gerard frequented was now under Spencer's watchful eye. He's not just a predator, Harold explained, pulling up financial records on the main screen. He's part of something bigger. Gerard's been funneling money through his real estate deals to 3 other men: Leonard Thompson, Omar Downey, and Floyd Abbott. They run what looks like legitimate businesses, but it's actually a network that targets wealthy divorcees. Spencer studied the photographs Harold had compiled. Leonard Thompson ran an upscale dating service that identified vulnerable women. Omar Downey operated a luxury addiction treatment center where women were kept dependent and compliant. Floyd Abbott managed a private investigation firm that fabricated evidence to destroy custody cases. They've been doing this for 7 years, Harold continued. 37 women total. The ones who fought back either disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances. Gerard wasn't lying about the wood chipper, Spencer. They have one at Floyd's property outside Tacoma. Spencer's expression didn't change, but Richard noticed his boss's breathing had become deeper, more controlled. It was a warning sign Richard had learned to recognize over the years. "Show me everything about Floyd's property," Spencer commanded. The compound was 50 acres of wooded land with a main house, several outbuildings, and a secluded area where industrial equipment was stored. Satellite imagery showed recent excavation work, areas where the earth had been disturbed and then carefully concealed. "How many are there?" Spencer asked quietly. "Unknown. But based on the missing women reports I've cross-referenced, I estimate at least 12 bodies." Harold's voice was grim. Spencer stood and walked to the window overlooking Elliott Bay. The rain had intensified, turning the city gray and cold. Somewhere out there, his son was being held prisoner by monsters who had perfected the art of destroying families. But they had made a critical error. They had chosen Spencer Mosley's family as their latest target. "Richard, I want teams watching all 4 locations simultaneously. Harold, transfer $5 million to the Cayman account and prepare the cleaner protocols. Lance, contact Ben Stokes at the port. I need containers ready for export tonight." Spencer turned back to his team, and they saw something in his eyes that made even these hardened men uncomfortable. It wasn't anger. Anger was hot and temporary. This was something colder, more permanent. "Gentlemen, we're not just rescuing Jeffrey. We're ending an operation that has been murdering women for 7 years. The police have failed, the courts have failed, society has failed. So we'll handle this ourselves." Spencer's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Nick Curtis. Gerard just left the house with 2 men. "Laura's alone with the boy, still locked in basement. You have a window." "This is it," Spencer announced. "Harold, kill the power to that neighborhood in 30 minutes. Make it look like a storm outage. Richard, bring the medical kit. Jeffrey's going to need attention." As they loaded into the SUVs, Spencer made one final call to his Dubai office. "John Matthews, this is Spencer. Initiate Protocol 7. Transfer all assets to secured accounts and prepare for extended absence." "Yes, I know what that means." "Do it anyway." Protocol 7 was Spencer's nuclear option. It dissolved his entire legitimate business empire and activated his shadow network. Spencer Mosley, the businessman, was about to disappear forever. In his place would emerge something far more dangerous: Spencer Mosley, the hunter. The convoy pulled out of the warehouse into the Seattle rain, windshield wipers cutting through the darkness like scythes. Spencer checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, the lights would go out across Laura's neighborhood, and then the real work would begin. Chapter 4: The Extraction. The blackout hit Laura's neighborhood at exactly midnight, plunging 6 square blocks into darkness. Emergency generators at the hospital 3 miles away continued humming, but everything else went silent except for the rain drumming against windows and rooftops. Spencer's team moved like ghosts through the Maple Leaf residential area. Richard Green had studied the house layout during their surveillance. A two-story colonial with a finished basement, surrounded by tall hedges that provided perfect cover. Gerard's security was amateur hour. A couple of motion sensors that Harold had already disabled, and two men sitting in a sedan out front who were more interested in their phones than watching for threats. Spencer approached the house from the back while Lance Webb and Kyle Ramirez neutralized the sedan. There was no violence, just a pressurized syringe through each car window. The men would sleep for 6 hours and wake up with massive headaches and no memory of the past 12 hours. The basement window had been modified with security bars, but Spencer had come prepared. Richard's bolt cutters made quick work of the metal, and within 30 seconds, Spencer was dropping silently into the basement. Jeffrey was huddled in the corner, wrapped in a thin blanket, shivering uncontrollably. When Spencer's flashlight beam found the boy's face, Jeffrey's eyes widened with disbelief. "Daddy." Jeffrey's voice was barely a whisper, raw from crying. "I'm here, son." Spencer's voice was gentle, a tone only Jeffrey ever heard. "We're going home." Spencer lifted Jeffrey carefully, noting the bruises on the boy's arms, the cut on his lip that had reopened, the way Jeffrey flinched when touched. Each injury was cataloged in Spencer's mind, added to the debt Gerard would pay. Getting out was easier than getting in. Harold had mapped every security camera in the neighborhood and created blind spots in their coverage. Spencer carried Jeffrey to the waiting SUV where a paramedic, one of Spencer's people, was standing by with blankets, medical supplies, and a thermos of hot chocolate. As they drove away from the house, Spencer held his son close, feeling the boy's thin frame gradually stop shivering. Jeffrey had fallen asleep by the time they reached Spencer's private medical facility, a clinic Harold had established years ago for situations that required discretion. Dr. Lorena Morris, one of Spencer's most trusted assets, conducted a thorough examination while Spencer paced the hallway like a caged wolf. The diagnosis was better than it could have been: mild hypothermia, dehydration, multiple contusions, and severe psychological trauma, but no broken bones or permanent physical damage. "He'll recover fully," Dr. Morris assured Spencer. "But he's going to need time and counseling." What he's been through. Spencer, this wasn't just neglect. This was systematic torture. Spencer nodded grimly. How long before he's strong enough to travel? 24 hours for physical stability. But psychologically, 24 hours, Spencer repeated. "That's all I need." While Jeffrey slept under medical supervision, Spencer returned to the Georgetown warehouse where Harold had been monitoring Gerard's reaction to the boy's disappearance. The cameras showed Gerard in a rage, smashing furniture while screaming at Laura, who had collapsed on the couch in a drug-induced stupor. But Gerard's phone calls were even more revealing. He had contacted Leonard Thompson, Omar Downey, and Floyd Abbott, reporting that the Dubai problem had escalated. They were accelerating their timeline, planning to disappear all evidence and relocate their operation to Mexico within 72 hours. "They're cleaning house," Harold reported. "Floyd's already started burning documents at his compound. Leonard's liquidating assets. They know you're back, and they're running scared." Spencer studied the surveillance feeds with cold calculation. These men had spent 7 years perfecting their system of exploitation and murder. They had networks, resources, and escape routes prepared for exactly this situation. A traditional response, calling police, working through courts, would result in them disappearing into the wind while evidence was destroyed. But Spencer wasn't planning a traditional response. "Richard, how many men can we have operational by tomorrow night?" 12, including specialists. "More if you're willing to wait 48 hours. 12 will do." "Harold, I need complete building schematics for Floyd's compound, Leonard's dating service, and Omar's treatment center. I also need background on all their employees, who's complicit, who's innocent." Spencer walked to the tactical equipment cache Richard had assembled. Body armor, night vision, tranquilizer guns, industrial-grade restraints, and items with more creative applications. This wasn't going to be a rescue mission. It was going to be an extermination. Gentlemen, tomorrow night, we end this network permanently. No trials, no plea bargains, no technicalities. We're going to do what the justice system couldn't. Protect every woman they might target in the future. Spencer's phone buzzed with a text from Gerard's number. Your boy was just the appetizer. Return what you took, or Laura's next. Then we're coming for you. Spencer showed the message to his team. Richard cracked his knuckles. Harold shook his head in disgust. Lance and Kyle exchanged knowing looks. Any questions about our mission? Spencer asked. There were none. These men had seen enough evil in their lives to recognize it when it wore a human face. Gerard Little and his associates had declared war on innocence itself. Now they were going to learn what war truly meant. Chapter 5, The Hunt. At dawn, Spencer stood over Jeffrey's hospital bed, watching his son sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. The boy's color had returned, and the medical monitors showed stable vitals. Dr. Morris had worked through the night, but Jeffrey was going to recover fully. Spencer gently touched his son's forehead, feeling the warmth that had been missing during that terrible FaceTime call. Then he kissed Jeffrey's temple and whispered a promise that would have chilled Gerard Little's blood. Daddy's going to make sure they never hurt anyone again. Back at the warehouse, Spencer's war room had expanded overnight. Maps covered every wall, showing Gerard's network in intricate detail. Harold had discovered that their operation extended beyond Seattle. Similar networks existed in Portland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, all coordinated by the same four men. It's bigger than we thought, Harold explained, pointing to financial transfers between cities. They've been building this for a decade. The Seattle operation alone has generated over $30 million, but that's just one branch. Spencer studied the organizational chart Harold had created. At the center were the four men he'd already identified, but branching out were dozens of accomplices. Lawyers who falsified custody documents, doctors who provided drugged medical reports, private investigators who planted evidence, and law enforcement officers who looked the other way. How many dirty cops? Spencer asked Nick Curtis, who had arrived an hour earlier with intelligence from inside the Seattle Police Department. At least 6 that I can't confirm. They've been paid to misfile reports, delay investigations, and reclassify suspicious deaths as accidents or suicides. Nick replied grimly. Spencer, this thing goes all the way to the deputy chief level. Spencer wasn't surprised. Corruption was like cancer. It spread until someone had the courage to cut it out completely. The justice system hadn't failed these women by accident. It had been deliberately sabotaged by men who profited from their suffering. Richard, what's our operational capacity for a multi-location strike? Richard had been studying tactical maps while Spencer and Harold talked. If we hit all 4 primary locations simultaneously, we can prevent communications and escape attempts. But we'll need specialized teams for each target. Floyd's compound is military-level security. Leonard's dating service is in a downtown high-rise. Omar's treatment center is basically a fortified medical facility. Spencer nodded. Then we get specialized teams. Harold, contact Enrique Peterson in Los Angeles and John Matthews in Vancouver. Tell them I'm calling in all favors. I need their best people here tonight. As Harold made calls, Spencer reviewed the intelligence on Gerard's past victims. Harold had managed to track down family members of the women who had died or disappeared. Their stories painted a horrifying picture of systematic psychological destruction, followed by financial exploitation and, ultimately, elimination. Sheila would have been a successful architect before meeting Gerard. Within 6 months, she had lost custody of her daughter. Her business had collapsed due to falsified tax problems, and she had committed suicide by jumping from Leonard Thompson's dating service building. The police had ruled it suicide without investigation. Lindsay Walter had been a pediatric nurse who inherited $2 million from her parents. Gerard had convinced her to invest everything in his real estate deals, then watched as she overdosed on drugs Omar Downey had prescribed. Her death was listed as accidental, despite clear evidence of forced injection. Graciela Nelson had been a federal prosecutor who got too close to uncovering their network. She had vanished while investigating Leonard Thompson's business practices. Her body had never been found, But Harold analysis of cell phone data showed her last known location was Floyd Abbott's compound. Each story made Spencer's resolve harder. These weren't random crimes of opportunity. They were calculated murders of women who threatened the network or had outlived their usefulness. Spencer's secure phone rang. It was Lon Shoemaker calling for Vancouver. "Spencer, I got Harold's message." "How bad is it?" "They touched my son, Lon. Locked him in a freezer and threatened to put me in a wood chipper." Silence on the line. Lon had known Spencer for 15 years, had helped him bury bodies and eliminate threats across 3 provinces. He understood that threatening Jeffrey Mosley was signing a death warrant. "What do you need?" "Everything. Tonight. All locations. Consider done. I'll be there in 4 hours with my team." As evening approached, Spencer's warehouse had transformed into a military command center. Enrique Peterson had arrived from Los Angeles with 3 specialists. John Matthews had flown in from Dubai with equipment that didn't exist on any legal manifest. Lon Shoemaker's team for Vancouver included men who had fought in wars that officially never happened. 22 men total, each one personally loyal to Spencer, each one carrying a debt that could only be paid in blood. Spencer addressed them as they prepared their equipment. "Gentlemen, tonight we're not just avenging my son. We're ending a network that has murdered at least 17 women and destroyed countless families. There will be no arrests, no trials, no technicalities. Justice failed these women. We won't." The team leaders synchronized their watches. At exactly 11 p.m., they would strike all 4 locations simultaneously. By dawn, Gerard Little's network would be nothing but a memory. Spencer checked his own equipment one final time, then looked at the photograph Harold had pinned to the wall, Jeffrey's school picture from last year, smiling and innocent. In a few hours, that smile would be safe forever. "It's time," Spencer announced. The warehouse doors opened, and 22 shadows disappeared into the Seattle night. Chapter 6, The Network Falls. At 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Spencer Mosley's war began on 4 fronts simultaneously. Leonard Thompson's upscale dating service occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise. The legitimate business was a front for identifying wealthy, vulnerable women for Gerard's network. Leonard himself was a predator who used psychological profiling to select victims, then passed their information to Gerard for the seduction phase. Enrique Peterson's team entered through the building's ventilation system, bypassing security cameras and motion sensors with military precision. They found Leonard working late, destroying hard drives that contained profiles of over 300 women. The destruction stopped permanently when Enrique's sniper put a tranquilizer dart through Leonard's neck. When Leonard awakened, he was zip-tied to his office chair, while Enrique's team systematically recovered every piece of evidence the man had tried to destroy. Backup drives, printed files, photographs, everything that documented 7 years of systematic targeting and exploitation. "Please," Leonard whimpered as he watched his life's work being cataloged. "I can pay you. I have money hidden." Enrique's response was a single gunshot that shattered Leonard's knee. "Spencer Mosley doesn't want your money. He wants justice." Leonard's screams echoed through the empty office building as Enrique's team prepared him for transport to a location where his knowledge would be extracted through methods not covered in any law enforcement manual. Simultaneously, Omar Downey's addiction treatment center in Bellevue was being infiltrated by John Matthews' Dubai team. The center was actually a sophisticated drugging operation where wealthy women were kept compliant through controlled addiction while their assets were systematically drained. John's team had studied the building's layout for hours, identifying security weak points and staff schedules. They entered during the night shift change, when only a skeleton crew remained on duty. The legitimate staff, nurses and counselors who believed they were helping patients, were quickly secured and sedated. The complicit staff members faced a different fate. Omar himself was found in his office, preparing to inject a new patient with a cocktail designed to induce permanent psychological dependency. The patient was Tamara Ames, a recently divorced tech executive whose ex-husband had recommended Omar's facility. John's intervention was swift and brutal. Omar's injection went into his own arm instead, delivering a dose that would keep him conscious but completely helpless for the next 12 hours. As Omar collapsed, John checked on Tamara and 17 other women who were being held against their will under the guise of treatment. Called Dr. Morris, John radioed to Spencer. We've got 18 victims here who need real medical attention. The most dangerous target was Floyd Abbott's compound outside Tacoma. This was where the network disposed of bodies and destroyed evidence. Floyd was a former military contractor who had turned his combat skills toward eliminating women who became inconvenient to Gerard's operation. Lon Shoemaker's Vancouver team approached the compound like the special forces operators they had once been. Thermal imaging showed 4 heat signatures in the main house and 2 more in the equipment building where the wood chipper was housed. Motion sensors and trip wires surrounded the property, but Lon's men had dealt with far more sophisticated defenses in Afghanistan and Iraq. The assault began with coordinated sniper fire that eliminated the perimeter guards silently. Then shaped charges blew out the main house's power and communications, plunging the compound into darkness while night vision-equipped attackers moved through rooms like deadly phantoms. Floyd Abbott died fighting, which was more than his victims had been allowed. He put 3 bullets into one of Lon's men before taking a sniper round through the skull. His associates lasted less than 30 seconds once the shooting started. But the real discovery came when Lon's team examined the excavation sites Harold had identified from satellite imagery. Ground-penetrating radar revealed 17 burial sites, each containing remains that matched missing women from Gerard's network. Spencer, Lon's voice was grim over the radio. We've got a mass grave situation here. This is bigger than we thought. While his teams handled the satellite locations, Spencer personally led the assault on Laura's house where Gerard was making his final stand. The man who had threatened to put Spencer in a wood chipper was about to learn that threats carried consequences. Spencer approached alone, walking openly up the front drive, while Richard Green and his team secured the perimeter. He wanted Gerard to see him coming. He wanted the man to understand that Spencer Mosley kept his promises. The front door exploded inward under Spencer's boot, and he stepped into the house that had once been his home. Laura was unconscious on the living room couch, needle tracks visible on her arms. Gerard had been keeping her compliant through forced injection. Gerard himself was in the kitchen, desperately trying to reach his associates by phone. When he saw Spencer, the phone slipped from his hands. "You're supposed to be in Dubai," Gerard stammered, backing against the refrigerator. "I was," Spencer replied calmly, pulling on leather gloves. "But then you made a mistake. You touched my son." Spencer's first punch shattered Gerard's nose. The second broke his jaw. By the third, Gerard was on the kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath his head. "Please," Gerard gasped through broken teeth. "I can give you money, information, other networks in other cities." Spencer's boot came down on Gerard's hand, crushing every bone. "I don't want your money, Gerard. I don't want your information. I want you to understand something very simple." Spencer knelt beside the broken man, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any scream. "You threatened my son. You locked him in a freezer. You promised to put me in a wood chipper. So now I'm going to keep that promise for you." Gerard's eyes widened in absolute terror as Spencer produced a syringe filled with the same paralytic agent Omar had been using on his victims. The injection would keep Gerard conscious and aware while preventing any movement or speech. "The wood chipper at Floyd's compound is still operational," Spencer explained as the drug took effect. "You're going to experience everything you promised me, Gerard, except you'll be the one going through it." As Gerard's body went rigid, Spencer lifted him effortlessly and carried him toward the waiting vehicle. Behind them, Richard Green was gently lifting Laura from the couch. She would be taken to Dr. Morris for treatment, then delivered to a private rehabilitation facility, not as punishment, but because Jeffrey needed his mother to recover. By dawn, Gerard Little's network had been completely dismantled. Leonard Thompson, Omar Downey, and Floyd Abbott were dead. Gerard himself would die slowly at Spencer's hands. The surviving accomplices, corrupt cops, lawyers, doctors, would be dealt with through Spencer's more subtle methods. But the 17 graves at Floyd's compound would finally be reported to authorities, along with enough evidence to posthumously convict the network's leaders and clear the names of their victims. Spencer Mosley had kept his promise. Justice had been served. Chapter 7: The Cleansing. Dawn broke gray and cold over Seattle as Spencer's teams completed their systematic destruction of Girard's network. The warehouse had become a processing center where Harold Wiley coordinated the collection and cataloging of evidence that would expose 7 years of systematic murder and exploitation. Spencer stood in the center of the operation, methodically cleaning blood from his hands while reviewing reports from each team leader. Girard Little lay unconscious in a specially prepared shipping container, paralyzed but alive, awaiting transport to Floyd's compound, where Spencer would personally fulfill his promise. Status report. Spencer commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Enrique Peterson stepped forward first. Leonard Thompson's operation is completely dismantled. We recovered files on 412 women across 6 states. Most were targeted, but never approached. Leonard was building a database for future expansion. The women who were victimized have been identified, and their families will receive anonymous evidence packages that will reopen their cases. John Matthews reported next. Omar's treatment center has been evacuated. 18 women were being held against their will through forced addiction. Dr. Morris is treating them at 3 separate private facilities. 4 staff members were complicit in the drugging operations. They're currently being transported to secure locations for questioning. Lon Shoemaker's report was the most disturbing. Floyd's compound yielded 17 bodies, exactly matching Harold's analysis. All female, ages ranging from 24 to 48. Forensic evidence confirms systematic torture before death. The compound has been sterilized and will be anonymously reported to federal authorities within 24 hours. Spencer nodded grimly. The scope of Girard's network had exceeded even his pessimistic estimates. 17 women murdered, dozens more psychologically destroyed and financially ruined, hundreds targeted for future exploitation. The cancer had been growing for a decade, protected by corruption and enabled by a justice system that failed to protect the vulnerable. But Spencer's war wasn't finished. The network had been decapitated, but its roots ran deeper than 4 men in Seattle. Harold, what about the extended network? Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland. Harold pulled up a complex organizational chart on his main screen. Girard's network was part of a larger organization. Based on financial transfers and communication patterns, I've identified similar operations in 7 cities. Conservative estimate: over 100 women murdered, thousands more victimized. Spencer studied the chart with cold calculation. The men he had eliminated tonight were middle management, not the true architects of this systematic evil. Somewhere, protected by layers of legitimate businesses and legal barriers, were the masterminds who had created this network of exploitation and death. How long to identify the leadership structure? 72 hours with the information we've recovered. Leonard's files contain communication logs going back 5 years. Omar's financial records show payment sources. Floyd's compound had a communication center with encrypted satellite uplinks. I'm breaking those encryptions now. Spencer's secure phone buzzed. It was Nick Curtis with an update from inside the Seattle Police Department. Spencer, you need to know, the deputy chief just called an emergency meeting. Someone leaked information about tonight's operations. They're mobilizing tactical units to sweep the locations. Spencer wasn't surprised. Corruption had tentacles that reached into every institution, and Girard's network would have contingency plans for exposure. But Spencer had anticipated this scenario. How long before they reached the compound? 2 hours, maybe 3 if the weather slows them down. Spencer checked his watch. Plenty of time to complete his business with Girard, then disappear before law enforcement arrived to find evidence of the mass grave and Girard's remains. The official investigation would conclude that Girard's network had been eliminated by rival criminals, and the case would be closed with justice served, if not through traditional channels. Richard, prepare Girard for transport. It's time to fulfill our promise to him. As Girard's paralyzed body was loaded into Spencer's armored SUV, Spencer made one final check on Jeffrey at Dr. Morris's clinic. The boy was awake, eating breakfast, his color restored, and his spirits improving. He looked up when Spencer entered, and for the first time in weeks, Jeffrey smiled. "Daddy, when can we go home?" Spencer knelt beside his son's bed, gently taking the boy's small hand in his scarred ones. "Soon, Jeffrey. Very soon. The bad people won't hurt you anymore. I promise." "What happened to Gerard? And Mom?" Spencer considered his words carefully. Jeffrey was 8 years old, too young to understand the full scope of what his father had done to protect him, but old enough to recognize that justice sometimes came from unexpected sources. "Gerard is gone forever. He'll never hurt anyone again. Your mother is getting help. She was sick, Jeffrey, but she's going to get better. And you're going to come live with me where you'll always be safe." Jeffrey's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief, not fear. "I knew you'd come, Daddy. I knew you wouldn't let them hurt me." Spencer kissed his son's forehead, breathing in the scent of childhood innocence that Gerard had tried to destroy. "I will always come for you, Jeffrey. Always. That's a promise I'll never break." An hour later, Spencer's convoy pulled up to Floyd's compound, where the industrial woodchipper sat silent in the morning mist. Spencer had promised Gerard he would experience everything he had threatened to do to Spencer, and Spencer Mosley never broke his promises. The paralytic drug was designed to wear off slowly, ensuring Gerard would be conscious and aware during his final moments. As feeling returned to Gerard's extremities, Spencer positioned him next to the machine that had consumed the bodies of 17 innocent women. "You promised to put me in the wood chipper, Gerard," Spencer said calmly, starting the machine's engine. "I'm a man who believes in keeping promises." Gerard's screams were lost in the roar of the machine and the sound of rain on the compound's metal roofs. When Spencer finally shut off the engine 20 minutes later, nothing remained of Gerard Little except memories that would haunt the survivors of his victims for the rest of their lives. Spencer stood in the silence that followed, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and red. Justice had been served, but the war was far from over. Gerard's network was just one tentacle of a much larger monster, and Spencer now possessed the information needed to hunt down every person responsible for the systematic murder of innocent women. His phone buzzed with a message from Harold. Primary targets eliminated. Evidence secured. Ready for Phase 2 operations. Spencer smiled grimly as he walked back to his SUV. Gerard Little had made the fatal mistake of threatening Jeffrey Mosley. In doing so, he had awakened something in Spencer that would not rest until every predator in the network was permanently neutralized. The cleansing had begun, and it would not end until justice had been served for every victim. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 3 days later, Spencer Mosley officially ceased to exist. Harold Wiley had worked around the clock to activate Spencer's carefully prepared escape protocols. Bank accounts were emptied and transferred through a labyrinth of offshore corporations. Properties were sold to untraceable buyers. Corporate shares were liquidated and reinvested under different names. Within 72 hours, Spencer's legitimate business empire had vanished, leaving no paper trail for authorities to follow. In its place emerged David Stone, a private security consultant with a flawless background and unlimited resources. David Stone was everything Spencer Mosley had been, but with one crucial difference. David Stone existed solely to hunt monsters. Jeffrey was recovering in a private medical facility in Vancouver, under the protection of Lon Shoemaker's team. The boy had no idea his father had just dissolved a business empire worth $900 million to ensure his safety. All Jeffrey knew was that the nightmares were fading and his father visited every day with stories and presents and promises that the bad people were gone forever. Laura was in a different kind of recovery. Dr. Morris had determined that Gerard's forced drug regimen had caused significant neurological damage, but with proper treatment, Laura would eventually regain most of her cognitive function. More importantly, she would remember enough to testify about Gerard's network if authorities ever connected the dots. But Spencer wasn't waiting for authorities. Harold's analysis of the recovered files had revealed the true scope of Gerard's organization, and Spencer was methodically hunting down every person responsible for the systematic murder of innocent women. The network's true leadership operated from Los Angeles under the direction of a man named Marcus Webb, a former federal prosecutor who had used his law enforcement connections to protect Girard's operation for over a decade. Webb controlled similar networks in 7 cities, generating over $200 million annually through the exploitation and murder of divorced women. Spencer's new identity allowed him to move freely while his team conducted surveillance on Webb's organization. Unlike Girard's amateur operation in Seattle, Webb's network was sophisticated, protected by layers of legitimate businesses, corrupt officials, and professional security. But Spencer had advantages Webb couldn't anticipate. The Dubai operation had given Spencer connections to arms dealers, mercenaries, and intelligence specialists who operated outside traditional law enforcement. More importantly, Spencer's network was bound by personal loyalty rather than financial motivation, making it nearly impossible to corrupt or infiltrate. Webb's operation is headquartered in a downtown LA high-rise, Herald reported during their evening briefing. 60 floors, private security, redundant communication systems. But I've found his weakness. Webb has a daughter, Emma, who attends UCLA. She has no idea what her father does, believes she's living off family trust funds. Spencer studied the surveillance photos of Emma Webb. 22 years old, pre-med student, volunteer at a women's shelter. The irony was bitter. The daughter of a man who murdered vulnerable women was dedicating her life to helping them. She's not a target, Spencer declared firmly. Emma Webb is innocent. We don't harm innocents. Richard Green nodded. Agreed, but we can use her to draw Webb out. Make him think she's in danger. No. Spencer's voice carried absolute finality. We don't use innocent people as bait, even to catch monsters. We find another way. This was the difference between Spencer and the men he hunted. Spencer's war had rules, boundaries he would not cross even to achieve victory. The innocent were protected, always. It was a principle that had cost him operationally in the past, but had allowed him to sleep at night. Harold had spent days studying Webb's personal habits, searching for vulnerability. He has a private residence in Malibu, but it's a fortress. 3-man security detail, electronic surveillance, direct line to LAPD. However, Webb visits a specific location every Sunday night, a private club in Beverly Hills called The Sanctuary. The Sanctuary was Webb's hunting ground, an exclusive establishment where wealthy divorced women met supposedly successful men. What the women didn't realize was that every man in the club was part of Webb's network, trained to identify and seduce vulnerable targets. Sunday night, then Spencer decided, we end this where it began, with Webb selecting his next victim. Spencer's team spent the week infiltrating the Sanctuary's security and staff. Enrique Peterson got hired as a bartender. John Matthews became a member using David Stone's impeccable credentials. Lon Shoemaker's surveillance team mapped every entrance, exit, and blind spot. Sunday night arrived with typical Los Angeles weather, 72 degrees and cloudless. Spencer, now completely transformed into David Stone, entered the Sanctuary wearing a tailored suit and the confident smile of a successful businessman looking for feminine companionship. The club was exactly what Harold's intelligence had described, a sophisticated hunting ground where predators stalked prey in an atmosphere of manufactured romance. Spencer watched Webb from across the room, studying the man who had orchestrated the deaths of hundreds of women. Webb was older than Spencer had expected, perhaps 60, with silver hair and the polished demeanor of someone accustomed to absolute authority. He moved through the club like a general inspecting troops, checking on his hunter's progress with various targets. Spencer's moment came when Webb approached the bar, where Enrique was serving drinks. The conversation was brief but revealing. Webb was planning to expand operations into Seattle now that the Girard situation had been resolved. Unfortunate what happened to Girard, Webb commented casually. But business must continue. Seattle has excellent opportunities for our kind of work. Spencer's jaw tightened. Webb spoke about Girard's death as a minor inconvenience, already planning to exploit the vacuum left by the Seattle network's destruction. In Webb's mind, the 17 women buried at Floyd's compound were merely business expenses, their murders justified by profit margins. That was Webb's final mistake. At exactly 11 p.m., Spencer's team moved with coordinated precision. The club's security cameras went dark. Electronic locks engaged, trapping everyone inside. The lights dimmed to emergency levels, creating an atmosphere of controlled panic. Spencer approached Webb directly, no longer hiding his identity or intentions. "Marcus Webb, my name is Spencer Mosley. You murdered my ex-wife's friends. You threatened my son. You've built an empire on the graves of innocent women." Webb's composure cracked for the first time in decades. Spencer Mosley is dead. Gerard killed him in Seattle. "Gerard was an amateur," Spencer replied calmly. "You're the professional. That makes you more dangerous, but also more predictable." Webb reached for the panic button that would summon security, but found his hand caught in Spencer's iron grip. Around the club, Webb's hunters were being systematically neutralized by Spencer's team. "Please," Webb whispered as Spencer's grip tightened. "I can give you everything. Names, locations, bank accounts. The entire network." Spencer studied Webb's face, seeing genuine terror for the first time. This was a man who had orchestrated hundreds of murders, but had never faced personal consequences for his actions. "You're going to give me everything anyway, Marcus. The only question is whether you do it voluntarily or involuntarily." What followed was a masterclass in information extraction that would have impressed professionals in several intelligence agencies. By dawn, Spencer possessed complete files on Webb's network. Every city, every operative, every corrupt official, every planned target. The network extended across 11 states with over 300 active operatives. Conservative estimates suggested 800 women had been murdered over 15 years, with thousands more financially destroyed and psychologically broken. But Spencer also discovered something that changed everything. Webb's operation was funded by a consortium of wealthy men who purchased hunting licenses to select and destroy specific women. These weren't random crimes of opportunity. They were commissioned murders carried out for sport. The true architects of this systematic evil weren't criminals in the traditional sense. They were judges, senators, CEOs, and foreign dignitaries who viewed the murder of vulnerable women as entertainment worth paying millions to experience. Webb's final act was providing Spencer with a membership list of this elite hunting club. 47 names, including 12 federal judges, 6 senators, 2 Supreme Court justices, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. As Webb died, slowly from the injuries Spencer had inflicted during interrogation, Spencer studied the list with growing horror. The corruption wasn't just institutional. It was systematic, reaching the highest levels of American government and society. Spencer's war had just expanded exponentially. Chapter 9, The Final Promise. 6 months later, David Stone disappeared as completely as Spencer Mosley had, replaced by a ghost who moved through the shadows of American power like an angel of death. The list Webb had provided became Spencer's holy grail, a roadmap to the systematic destruction of the most protected predators in American society. Each name represented years of careful planning, as these men had surrounded themselves with security, legal protection, and political influence that made them seemingly untouchable. But Spencer had learned patience during his years building his business empire, and he applied that same methodical approach to his campaign of justice. He didn't strike randomly or emotionally. Each operation was planned with surgical precision to ensure maximum impact while maintaining complete deniability. Federal Judge Robert Harrison was first. Harrison had purchased hunting licenses for 7 women over 3 years, selecting victims from divorce cases in his courtroom, and then arranging for Webb's network to destroy them. Harrison's death appeared to be a heart attack during his morning jog, but Spencer had injected him with an untraceable compound that mimicked cardiac arrest while ensuring Harrison remained conscious long enough to understand why he was dying. Senator Patricia Coleman followed 2 weeks later. Coleman had used her position on the Judiciary Committee to block investigations into missing women, protecting Webb's network in exchange for detailed videos of her selected victims' final moments. Her car accident on a mountain road outside Denver looked completely natural, until forensic investigators found a farewell note in her own handwriting confessing to conspiracy in multiple murders. Each death sent shockwaves through the remaining members of the hunting club, but they couldn't identify their stalker or predict his methods. Spencer had learned from Gerard's mistakes. There was no pattern to discover, no signature to trace. Each operation was unique, perfectly tailored to the target's vulnerabilities and circumstances. Supreme Court Justice William Brennan lasted 4 months before Spencer reached him. Brennan had been the most careful of Webb's clients, using intermediaries and electronic dead drops to communicate with the network. But Spencer's investigation revealed that Brennan kept trophies from his victims, jewelry, and personal items he displayed in a private room in his Georgetown mansion. Brennan's death was particularly poetic. Spencer broke into the mansion during a dinner party, disabled the security systems, and methodically arranged the stolen jewelry around Brennan's body. When guests found him, Brennan was surrounded by dozens of pieces of evidence linking him to murdered women, along with a typed confession detailing his involvement in Webb's network. The media called it the Georgetown Horror, and the resulting investigation exposed corruption reaching into the highest levels of the federal judiciary. 3 more Supreme Court justices were implicated, and the president was forced to nominate replacements while congressional investigations demolished public confidence in the court system. But Spencer's most satisfying operation was Secretary of Homeland Security Michael Torres. Torres had used his access to federal databases to help Webb's network identify and track victims across state lines. He had also personally selected 12 women for elimination, including Graciela Nelson, the federal prosecutor who had gotten too close to exposing the network. Spencer spent 3 months studying Torres's security protocols, identifying a single vulnerability: Torres's weekly visits to his mother in a nursing home outside Baltimore. The visits were strictly private, with minimal security, and followed a predictable route through suburban neighborhoods. On a rainy Thursday evening, Torres's armored limousine stopped at a red light 2 miles from the nursing home. Spencer appeared from the shadows like death incarnate, his face painted with traditional war paint that would confuse security cameras and witness descriptions. The secretary's bodyguards never had a chance. Spencer moved through them with the fluid violence of a man who had been killing professionally for decades. Torres himself was paralyzed with a dart gun and dragged into the woods bordering the road. Spencer had prepared a special justice for Torres. The man who had helped murder federal prosecutors would die slowly, piece by piece, while listening to Spencer read the names of every woman Torres had helped kill. Graciela Nelson. Spencer began, removing Torres's left index finger with a surgical saw. Age 34, federal prosecutor, mother of 2. You provided her home address to Webb's network. They tortured her for 3 days before killing her. Torres screamed through his gag as Spencer continued the litany of names, each accompanied by another carefully calculated injury. The process took 6 hours, during which Torres experienced a fraction of the suffering he had helped inflict on hundreds of innocent women. When Torres finally died, Spencer arranged his body in a position that told a story. The Secretary of Homeland Security was found crucified to a tree, surrounded by photographs of his victims and a detailed confession that implicated 23 other government officials in Webb's network. The Torres killing triggered a federal task force that ultimately exposed the entire hunting club conspiracy. Mass arrests followed, though many of the conspirators died under mysterious circumstances before they could be brought to trial. The American political system convulsed as the scope of the corruption became clear, leading to the largest governmental purge in American history. But Spencer's war wasn't about politics or justice systems. It was about keeping a promise to his son. 1 year after Gerard Little had threatened to put Jeffrey in a freezer, Spencer sat in a Swiss chalet overlooking Lake Geneva, watching Jeffrey build a snowman in the yard below. The boy was 11 now, tall for his age, with his father's steel gray eyes and his mother's gentle smile. He spoke 3 languages, excelled in mathematics, and had no idea that his father had systematically eliminated 47 of the most powerful predators in American society. Laura lived in the chalet's guest wing, her mind largely healed from Gerard's forced drug regimen. She painted watercolors now, taught Jeffrey to cook, and never asked questions about the source of their unlimited wealth or the armed men who discreetly protected their mountain refuge. Spencer's reflection was interrupted by his secure phone. Harold Wiley was calling from his new base of operations in Monaco, where he coordinated intelligence for Spencer's ongoing operations. "Spencer, I've identified a new network operating out of Tokyo. Similar methods to Webb's organization, but focused on Eastern European women. Conservative estimate, 200 victims over 5 years." Spencer watched Jeffrey chase their German shepherd through the snow, the boys' laughter echoing across the mountain valley. This was what innocence looked like, joy untempered by knowledge of the evil that existed in the world. "Prepare the files," Spencer said quietly. "We start planning tomorrow." Spencer Mosley had made his son a promise that night in Dubai when Gerard's threats had shattered their peaceful video call. He had promised that the bad people would never hurt Jeffrey again, that they would never hurt anyone again. It was a promise Spencer intended to keep for the rest of his life. As the sun set over the Swiss Alps, Spencer holstered his phone and walked outside to join Jeffrey in the snow. Tomorrow would bring new monsters to hunt, new innocent lives to protect, new promises to keep. But tonight belonged to a father and son building snowmen in the shadow of mountains, safe in the knowledge that some evils could only be fought by men willing to become monsters themselves. Spencer Mosley had found his true calling, and he would never forgive, never forget, and never stop until every predator who targeted innocence had paid the ultimate price. The war was far from over, but Spencer was a patient man. He had all the time in the world to keep his promises. All the time in the world.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.